I'm going to share with you the same strategies that I was able to use to apply to residency with over 30 publications. And this will work whether you're a pre-med student that wants research on your medical school application, or if you are a medical school student who needs a bunch of research for residency. So let's get right into it. So in order to get published research, the first thing you need to do is actually get a research position. So how can you go about doing this? Well, as a pre-med student or even medical student, you need to find a PI that you want to work with, and I recommend really only doing research in an area that you're interested in. Now, you might not know what that area may be, and therefore it's not a bad idea to try out a couple of different research positions or apply to a bunch of different research positions and get a feel for what the studies are like, how the groups are run. There's lots of different types of research. So for example, you can apply, and this goes more for pre-med students, but you can apply into basic science research. You could do clinical research, especially if your school is associated with a medical school, which is very helpful. You can do social science research. Especially as a pre-med, it doesn't really matter as much the type of research that you're doing, and learn how to approach getting research published will be very, very helpful in your future career as a physician, and that's why medical schools like to see it. You need to be able to read the research literature later on so that you can stay up to date with the latest treatments, what's working, what's not, and apply that to your patient population and providing the standard of care for your future patients. And so even if you're not doing clinical research, the skills that you will learn through a research experience, no matter what that is going to be very important and stay with you the rest of your career. And that's why it's not absolutely necessary to get research to get into medical school, but it definitely helps and really looks good on your application. So how can you go about getting research? Well, you need to be persistent and be willing to reach out to many different PIs. PI stands for Principal Investigator, and they are going to be the head of your research group. So for me in undergrad, I did nutrition research with someone that was in the nutrition department at Cornell, and it's something that I really enjoyed. My major had a basis in nutrition, and I wasn't sure if I really wanted to do basic science research. There wasn't as much clinical experience that I knew of, at least, and I'm going to tell you, even if your school is not associated with a medical school, how you could potentially get clinical experience that I didn't know about back when I was trying to get research. But so I ended up doing nutrition research. You could really do whatever you want, but you have to reach out to a bunch of different PIs, try and show an actual interest in what they're doing, show that you've read some of their most recent studies, and bring that up in the email that you write them and say, these are some things that I'm interested in. These are some of the things that I can do. So for example, you may say, I'd be happy to work on collecting background research to write the introductions of manuscripts, or analyzing data. I have already taken a statistics class, or I know how to use SPSS, the statistics software. Any asset that you can bring to the table, definitely let them know about it, and just show that you are ambitious and willing to learn and really willing to work hard. Now, again, research can be very time consuming, and especially if you're pre-med, you don't want it to take over your whole life and take away from doing well in your classes. So you may want to figure out a good balance and what's right for you. Everyone's going to be different. Some people might get really invested in a hard basic science lab, and others may only want to do 5 to 10 hours a week in a social science. It's really up to you, but you should apply broadly and really just try to get familiar with different types of options that are available to you. And then when you're going back and forth with a couple of professors via email, or PIs via email, because it might be a doctor that's not a professor, you can then set up a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting and try to learn more about what their expectations would be for you, what studies you could potentially be on, and then hopefully if you get a couple of different invitations to be a part of a research group, you can then choose the one that you think you would be the most interested in, because research can be hard at times, and so if you're actually interested in what you are researching, it makes the whole thing a lot more enjoyable. It's also important to know what types of research you can get involved in and what types of studies. Now, what I mean by this is there is a hierarchy of research studies with meta-analysis and systematic reviews at the top of the hierarchy and case studies at the bottom. The higher you go up, the more valued that research tends to be, but also may require increasing amounts of work and difficulty. So meta-analyses can be very time consuming, so can systematic reviews. Then underneath meta-analyses are randomized controlled trials, which definitely can be a lot. If you are a student and you're trying to jump on a study, it's probably better that you try to do a randomized controlled trial that's already IRB approved. If you are fortunate to get into into that in a research group. But if you've been in a group for a while, or you know you're going to be there long term, you can also try to talk to your PI about starting an RCT. Other types of research would be a cohort study, then a case control study, and then a case series. Now that I've mentioned all the different types of research studies you could do, it's important to note that you don't need to be on a 2 or 3 year randomized controlled trial to actually get a publication through. You could do other types of research like a case control study or a cohort study that is usually a lot faster. And basically what you would do, and you obviously in accordance and under the supervision of your PI, is you would propose a research question, formulate a hypothesis, figure out what data you would need to try and answer that question, and then use different data sets that maybe your PI already has, or there's many national data sets, or if you're doing clinical research and you're at a hospital, usually they have their own types of ways to pull data from data sets. And you can now go get the data, analyze it using a software like SPSS or your school statistician. Usually I recommend that if either the PI or a statistician working on the team helps you figure out how to analyze that data. And you could actually write up a whole abstract which has a background, method, results, and conclusion section, and you can now submit that abstract to a conference. Now this would be before you even write the manuscript. You would find a conference that's in the field that you did research on, submit it. There's usually a couple per year. There's national conferences, there's local conferences. You submit that and it could get accepted for a poster presentation, or it could get accepted for a podium presentation. And if that is accepted, it will get published at the conference and you would also get to present. So that in itself is a research experience. And also you then have validation that your study is a pretty good study, although sometimes studies that are not well done are still accepted at conferences. But it shows that people are interested in what you're doing. You want to make sure your methodologies are good. But once you do this and you're published at a conference, you can now work on the manuscript, and maybe you've done extra research since then, you've added to the data, or it's the same exact thing, but you're just writing up a full manuscript. If you do this, then you could submit it to a journal and get it accepted as a manuscript, a journal publication as well, which looks really good. And these could count as 2 separate research experiences on your CV. Now, some people will change the name slightly between the conference and the manuscript submission. I don't necessarily think you need to do that. You could still put it as both on your CV, that you've presented this at a conference and you've also published it in XYZ manuscript. So this is a really cool way to get research published earlier. Even though it's not a manuscript, at least you're getting an abstract done, which is very helpful, and for a pre-med student would look really good. And then also, you know, you're going along the right path, and most of the things that I've submitted to different conferences that got approved, I then was able to get approved for a manuscript submission. Also, when you're submitting for manuscripts, you can start at a really high ranking journal and then work your way down. Some journals are extremely hard to get published in. It doesn't mean your research isn't good if it doesn't get published in the most prestigious journals. And so if you get rejected from that journal, then you could apply to a journal that may not be as difficult to get accepted at. I wouldn't go to any journal where you have to pay to get accepted or anything like that. That's a bad idea. You want this to be a peer-reviewed process. But once you do this a bunch, you'll start to realize oh, I think this would be a good study for this type of journal because they like this category of research also more than that other journal that I usually get rejected from, or something like that. You'll figure out the different journals in your area of research. I did a lot of research in spine, so I kind of know the different spine journals. I've gotten some accepted to the top spine journals, and then others that are not at top journals but still peer-reviewed, very good journals. And so this is a way to get multiple different research experiences. Also, once you start working with your PI in this manner and you form a relationship, they may give you more independence. Potentially you could even get on your own study. I kind of brought up this whole process, but a lot of times if you're just jumping into a research group, these are going to be processes that are already taking place and you're going to jump on study and help out where needed. But if you formulate your own question and really do a lot of the bulk work, then you could probably get a first author publication, and a PI would definitely sign off on that more likely if you've been working with them for a good amount of time. And so what I've told you here can work both for pre-meds and for medical students, and is a really great way to get your foot in the door with research. Let's put it this way: by writing a manuscript, you're going to learn a lot better how to read one. And I found that my skills have definitely improved because I've written so many manuscripts and abstracts at this point that I have a better sense of how to break down a manuscript when I'm reading one. And if you're interested in maybe doing a breakdown of how to actually read through a manuscript, let me know in the comments below. But this is basically what I did over 4 years of doing research in medical school, or I guess 5 years actually, because I took a research year, where I was able to get tons of publications. But you might not need 30 plus publications or research experiences when you're applying to your residency. You definitely don't need that much for applying to medical school. Honestly, like I said earlier, you can get into medical school without actually having research, but I do recommend it to most students to at least try it out because it is important and it will continue to come up in your career as a physician. So I hope you found this helpful. If there's any questions I didn't answer about research, let me know and maybe I'll make a part 2 to this video. And please like and subscribe. It would mean the world to me, and we are on the road to 10,000 subscribers. And so if you're a medical student, pre-med, student in general, or anyone else who's finding this content valuable, then I would love for you to be on the journey with me, and I'll see you in the next video.